All right, good evening, my downline darlings. How are you faring this evening? I think some of you are still sleeping. How are you faring? All right then, let us be giving you some information at the moment on the idea that has been called in my world the 5 levels of mastery. This is a process, this is a training, this is a system that has been developed over hundreds of years of your counting, us being upline 700 of your years. That which you call your future on your own world, and me being in the Emerald Isle. The idea of the 5 levels of mastery involves the training that allows an initiate to become that which is known as a cryptic, a nocturnal, a shapeshifter, a sage, and finally, should one be kenning to go in that direction, a wraith. The idea is represented by different symbols, and we will be explaining what each level may mean. The first level of the cryptic is represented by the symbol of a triangle, which represents the idea of the earth, and the cryptic's training will allow the being to make the connections necessary to ground oneself in the earth plane. For you see, getting in touch and learning to communicate with the trees, with the rocks, with the animals, with the sea and the sky, and all these things of your physical reality will allow you to remain grounded when dealing with the other levels. If you did not go through the phase of becoming a cryptic, which allows you to understand how to communicate with those things of your own reality, of your own world, before you go shooting off into other dimensions, then it would be like a strong wind rushing at you and you having no roots. It would overturn you and uproot you. So by grounding yourself and having deep roots, you stay firm and connected to the earth while you're out exploring the ideas later on in the other levels of other dimensions and other energies and parallel realities. So the idea of the cryptic is to form an ability to communicate and commune with all these life forms on your planet, to really anchor yourself into the physical reality and become truly expressive as a part of nature, so that you can extend your senses and hear the stories of the trees and the stories of the brooks and the stories of the rocks and the stories of the birds and all these things that form a rich tapestry of the world as you may know it. Going through that training will involve many different kinds of things, including the idea of the use of a substance that we have termed divinorum. Now the idea is it opens up your senses and allows you to really begin to relate to these other life forms by allowing it to be a little bit easier to shift your frequency. It is specially designed and brewed by divinorum masters. My master being that you know as a Sasquatch named of Argus. And in taking the divinorum and opening up those realms and those windows to the nature of nature, you allow yourself to connect not only with the trees and the rocks and the birds and the bees, but also with those beings you would call the elementals, which we will be talking about tomorrow of your time. But the idea is that in coming to your world 700 years ago, from my perspective, downline we call it, the idea is that the hybrids with their extended senses began to perceive that there were these elemental beings that many humans could not see, and we began to develop relationships with them, and in developing those relationships, they taught us many things about how to connect to nature in similar ways to them, how to understand that we were part of nature, as you all are. When you then go beyond the level of the cryptic, and you begin your journey into the level called the nocturnal, the idea is now you have established and grounded yourself in this one reality, or what you consider to be one reality. Of course, many of you now know it is a series of parallels, but we are now talking about the idea of the timeline that you consider to be your own. But when you go beyond that and you have connected to that, you can begin to explore the idea and sense the idea of other parallel realities that coexist simultaneously with you all. In exploring those parallel realities and becoming a nocturnal and understanding the secrets of the night and those that reveal themselves in the cool moonlight, you begin to pick up information and knowledge about different parallel realities, different parallel reality versions even of yourselves. And you can call upon that information in those parallel worlds, and you can download it into your world and apply it in your reality. It is a rich tapestry of information that you can call upon when you arrive on the level of the nocturnal. Now, going from that level of recognizing the idea of your connection to nature in terms of the parallel realities and the information that you're able to download with those awarenesses and those connections, you can move to the next level in your training, which is the Shapeshifter. Something that people on your planet don't quite understand, even though you may know the concept of the Shapeshifter, is that there is actually no shifting of your shape in terms of the idea of chemistry and molecules and things like that. That's not the way it works. Once you have established as a nocturnal some connection to these parallel realities and different versions of your own being, the Shapeshifter has then developed the opportunity and the ability to call upon those shapes of alternate selves and alternate presentations from parallel realities and create the presentment of them in their own reality. They are not actually in any way, shape, or form altering their own molecular structure per se, but they are taking on the persona to the degree that they need to of other parallel versions of their own being and presenting those to those who are in the reality in which they are anchored. So they are really becoming a literal reflection of different parallel reality individuals. And that is why they can also take the shapes of the trees and the rocks and the birds and the bees, because again, they are just different angles of different reflections of us all. Moving on to the idea then from shape-shifting to the sage. Now the sage can not only call upon the idea of changing their own identity and presenting it to those around them in the way of the shapeshifter, but can actually call upon the reality itself and change the reality around them to be representative of another parallel reality to the degree that others can sense this and perceive and experience this. And you would call this wizardry and witchcraft and magic, but it is simply the idea of identifying so strongly with another parallel reality that they can allow others to match a frequency very easily where they can actually see that parallel reality and so appear to be conjuring objects, changing physical objects within their reality. But no such thing is going on in the way that you typically think of it. It is again that they are allowing an object that already exists simultaneously, right here, right now, from another parallel reality to appear before your eyes and take the place of what was there before in the reality that you're used to. When you go from the sage into the level of the wraith, which sometimes can be quite challenging for many individuals, and very, very few people will do this. It is a very rare thing for those sages to become wraiths, for there are different kinds of ideas that can occur, that can happen, that can take you a little bit off course and be very challenging. But those that can understand how to achieve the balance between the sage and the wraith will understand that now they have tapped in to all these parallel realities that you would consider to be physical in a similar manner to your own, are now stretching and bridging themselves between the physical and the non-physical, between the world of matter and the world of spirit. And they can actually cause changes in the spiritual reality that can appear in certain ways upon the earth and can function very similarly to the idea of what the Bashar has described of his world in terms of actually being quasi-physical, bridging those two realities and exhibiting many of the attributes of spirit while still remaining connected to the physical realm. They can make adjustments in the template level reality that exists in the spirit realm and cause great changes to occur in the physical world around them and in many other parallel realities. They can extend their abilities into other parallel realities, visit those other parallel realities, cause changes in those other parallel realities in addition to their own, because now they are coming from the level of spirit that bridges all of those parallel realities. So these are the 5 levels of mastery. And as we said, the first level, the cryptics, is represented by the idea of the triangle, which represents the earth. Then you have the idea of the nocturnal, which is represented by a wavy line, which represents the sea. Then you have the idea of the shapeshifter, which is represented by an arch, or an arc, as you may term it, which represents the sky and the changing weather patterns. Then you have the idea of the sage, which is represented by the idea of the circle, or space as you would have it, the void, out of which all things come. Then you have the idea of the wraith, which is represented by the dot, which is the idea of the center and source, which is spirit. So you have the earth, and you have the sea, and you have the sky, and you have space, and you have spirit. And those are the 5 symbols that represent the different levels, the 5 levels of mastery. Are you all somewhat kenning what we are saying to you? Yeah. All right. Now, there will be, at the end of the transmission, the idea during your holotrope meditation of a meditation that will help take you through some of the idea of crystallizing this concept of the 5 levels within you. We didn't expect all of you to become masters tonight, but we understand that we can plant the seed within you so that you may decide for yourselves which ideas will work best for you and how to initiate yourselves and become your own apprentice to begin to grow this seed. Begin to find a way and a path that works for you in your own mastery of self and in your connection to your own nature and your connection to the infinite. So if you will be joining us on that journey, we will be very happy to begin your initiation that way during your holotrope meditation, taking you through those 5 levels on a cursory level. So be it, but nevertheless planting that seed that you can water and you can grow by shining the light of your own inner light upon it. Now then, we will, as has been suggested, sort of, as you say in your language downline, hang around with you for a little while, and we will be answering some of your questions and having dialogues with you if you wish. So if you would, you may begin to do that. Oh, let us say good day to you, everyone. How are you all? All right, thank you. Let us begin this transmission with the title that we have chosen, called The Future of the Past. Let us begin by allowing us to read you a newspaper headline. JFK assassinated today in Boston, Massachusetts. This date, November 9th, 1968. What does this mean? This is a parallel reality different from the one you now consider to be your history. And of course, there are many other versions of this scenario. We once shared with you that another version of your history that you experienced before the present one allowed this particular individual, your President Kennedy, to survive until your 1980s. But the one that we have mentioned today, November 9th, 1968, has a particular meaning to the history that you believe you remember. The idea is that history is not linear. It is holographic and is made of many different kinds of intrusions of parallel realities. At the very least, if not the events themselves, the effects of other events in other realities color what you consider to be your linear history. So to continue this example, the idea to remember is that what you think of history is always changing, always. When you as a collective group decide to shift to a particular parallel reality path, remember that as you become a new society, as you become new people, you also create a new history to go along with that, to make sense out of the choice that you made in the present. Because the past is created from the present, not the other way around. So you have had many histories that you are now unaware of, because every time you change, you wipe the slate and create a new history that appears to be the only history you've ever had. So, several years ago, you actually had a different history than what you remember now. But you don't know that. But because we can see the bigger picture and all the lines of intersecting energies between different parallel realities, we can see the path that you've taken. In this particular case, let's say the original, one of the original history choices you made was that your President Kennedy was in fact assassinated in 1968. The reason for this is because near the end of his second term, he was about to reveal the existence of extraterrestrials. The idea is that it actually was revealed. And in that particular parallel history caused so much chaos and so much collapse in your society that he was labeled as the cause of it. And someone assassinated him for that reason. Now, because of the societal collapse in that particular history that went along with the revelation of our existence, you decided to shift as a society and take another path. And to prevent it from happening, you chose a history where he died in 1963. And therefore never had a chance to reveal what he had planned to reveal. However, to illustrate the point that your history isn't linear, that it is affected by ripples from other parallel realities all the time, because the original assassination occurred in 1968 based on the idea of the collapse of society, it created a very strong eddy, a very strong current in the fabric of space-time. So even when you shifted your collective consciousness to the idea of a history in which he died in 1963, effects from the original 1968 still existed and still impacted the new history, which is why Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King were assassinated in 1968. So if you begin to understand how this actually works, you can see that what you consider to be a linear history back in time is actually composed of many different parallel reality ripples and effects that all come together and change every single time that you change your idea of what your present is. That then changes what your idea of your history ought to be in order for that history to have brought you to the new present that you're at, because you still have to do it in a linear way to play the physical reality game. But in understanding this holographic nature of history, you can never really look at the idea of history in a linear way again. You will understand that it is a composite of many different overlapping realities, and it is constantly dynamically changing every time you make any change whatsoever. Not just the societal level, but your own personal histories as well, because as you become a new person, every time you redefine yourself, you create a new history for yourself. Now, if it seems to be the same, again, This is because you have wiped the memory of the old history, and the new history must appear to be the only history that's ever been there in order for it to make sense for the person you've defined yourself to be in present. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't sometimes choose to recreate similar events over and over and over again every time you define yourself and create a similar history to some degree. This does happen because most of you have an agreement not to necessarily go too far in breaking the continuity of your mass consensus reality about what your history ought to be based on who you consider yourselves to be or define yourselves to be in the present. Nevertheless, this points out that you always, every single moment, have a choice to change your past as you change your present. And to understand that the more you wrap your mind around this, the more you allow yourself to understand how this works and how it's structured more holographically, you have more opportunity to, within relevant parameters for your life, break that continuity more and more and more. And the breaking of that continuity will create more, shall we say, fluidity and flexibility within how you experience space and time, which means you will experience an increase in synchronicity, which is physical reality's linear space-time way of showing you that all things exist at once, that they're all interconnected. You will increase your experiences of things like déjà vu, which is experiencing the idea of the forward arrow of time and the backward arrow of time simultaneously, because you have the feeling in déjà vu that you know what's about to happen because it feels like it's already happened before. So you're getting both arrows of time simultaneously by expanding your consciousness to incorporate that idea. You will increase many other kinds of experiences in physical reality. But what it will mostly allow you to do when you really understand this concept is truly be more lucid in the physical reality dream and truly be more conscious about the kinds of choices you are making, the kinds of ways in which you define yourself and what's true for you, and exactly what that does to the entire linear space-time reality when you do that. And it will give you more understanding of how you are creating your reality experience, because physical reality is just a projection. It's just a dream. And it's all about becoming more and more lucid in the physical dream and waking up in that lucidity. And then knowing more and more, and again, whatever way is relevant for you, that you can bend the idea of space and time because you're actually doing it all the time anyway. It's just that you're becoming more conscious of the mechanism that you're using. That's what's going on in this transformational age. You're becoming more conscious of what you're already doing. It's no longer being seen in an illusionary way as if it were real. You're beginning to break through the veil and see it for the illusion that it is. Now, this won't completely go away while you still choose to be physical, but it will give you a lot more flexibility in how you experience your physical reality. It will still always be relevant. Whatever comes up will always be relevant for the life path you chose, for the theme you chose to explore. It won't go beyond that relevance. But there are different degrees of relevance for many different people on your planet. So many of you will start to experience more magical experiences in physical reality. You will see that it is more flexible, more synchronous, and always has been. It's just, again, that you're becoming more and more aware of it. So the idea is that in the future, your history will really start to more consciously match what you define yourself to be in the present. So the future of history, the future of the past, is very open, very flexible, and you're beginning to understand that the past is just as indeterminate as the future is. That the probabilities of what might become your future also are the probabilities of what might become your past. Because these are both projections from the only place you actually exist, the present. That's all there is. There is only here, there is only now. So everything that is happening, everything that you think will happen, everything you think has happened, is just another projection, another reflection, another perspective of the now. And that's why when you change the now, everything else has to change, both the future and the past, because they're just reflections of what you're defining yourself to be now, and are as ephemeral as a reflection in a mirror. They do not have real solidity. You play the game that they do, and that's fine. But now is the time to allow yourself some leeway, some permission to break that continuity to the degree that truly serves you to experience yourself as the creator of your reality experience. Because remember, as we have said before, your natural state is one of spirit. You're all still in spirit right now. It's just that you're dreaming that you're not. That's what physical reality is. You have never left spirit. You can't leave spirit, but you can dream that you can. And that's what this is. And we're sharing that dream together by agreeing to do so. And remember that you are redefining yourself billions of times per second. Your consciousness is slipping through billions of parallel reality frames per second. So at any given moment, you are always back to zero. You always have a clean slate. You always have the ability to redefine yourself in whatever way is truly relevant for the theme you chose to explore. And there's a lot of leeway in that. None of you are stuck in any way, shape, or form, especially not in this day and age. This is all about understanding consciousness, that you are an expression of consciousness, and that time and space are your illusions to play with, are your projections, are your tools to discover yourself from a new perspective, a new point of view. Because if you don't forget who you are, you can't remember who you are from another point of view. That's why you have this physical dream. To discover a new idea of yourself, a new perspective of yourself, a new relationship to all that is of yourself as an aspect of all that is. Does this make some sense to you? Yeah. All right. So, we share that idea with you, that history is always changing, never static, exactly to the same degree that you believe your future probabilities change. But you, here, squarely in the middle, in the now, in the present, the fundamental you never changes. The structure of your consciousness never changes. The expression of it does, the form of it does, but the basic fundamental you will always be you. It will always be your perspective from which you are having any experience of a future or a past. It will always be from your perspective that you will have any experience of physical or non-physical reality. It will always be you from your perspective that will have any experiences of other dimensions, other realms, other parallel realities, anything you can imagine. It will always be you having the experience, because you are the constant. You are the structure that never changes. But your relationship to yourself, your perspective of yourself, always changes. Your experience of yourself always changes. And you get to decide in what direction it will change. The more lucid you become in this physical dream, the more you surrender to your true self, the more you will realize that surrender is actually control, because you are already in control. You've just forgotten that you are. So remind yourself and play with this idea of holographic history and see the bigger picture so that you can understand the relationship of how parallel realities work together to create not only the probable future, but the probable past, and how this informs you so that you can make more aligned, more harmonious decisions about who and what you choose to be in the present. Does this make sense? All right. Well, we thank you for allowing us to share this idea with you this day of your time. And in return for the gift of sharing that you are giving us, I ask now, in what way may we be of service to you? You may begin with your questions and dialogues if you wish.